Hello guys, welcome back, and in this lesson we are going to look on HTML elements that are used in conjunction with CSS. All right, so many a times we do use HTML elements without the knowledge. For some of us, there are a number of HTML elements that we use without the knowledge that actually behind the scene these elements do use CSS. So for example, even by default, you see this OL and this H1. By default, behind the scenes, they use a number of CSS to format them the way they appear. So for example, here I'll just say div. All right, this should be div, and then I'll just use lorem here to generate some demi text here. So what happens is that a div by default in the background, it has some CSS. For example, let us say style is equals to width equals to rather width 100%. All right, so div, if you don't define your width, it will automatically cover the 100 or 100% of the width of the screen. All right, so if you want it to cover maybe 50% or 30%, whatever, and then you have to define CSS to do that. Otherwise, by default, it covers 100% of your width. So if I go to the browser here, just I'll do a refresh here. So you see this is the div that we have defined and covers 100% of the width. But now again, we have things like span. Span by default, behind the scene, they use CSS for width auto, which means use the width which is equal to the length of the data that has been defined here in the span. All right. So for example, if I copy this here, I paste this here span, and then I use another span. Let's copy this guy. You'll see that this will again be on the same line, which means this doesn't cover a whole, it's not a block element as the div is. That is what is called in HTML. An element that covers the full width, they are known as block elements. An element that covers a percentage of the width depending on the length of the data or the text that you have provided, then they are called inline elements. So if I go here again, I'll do a refresh here. You see now we have this second line, but this, remember, there are two spans. So for example, if I just put some simple CSS here and say I'll show you how to do all this when we start doing CSS on the next module. So if I say background color and I put, let us say maybe yellow like this. If I go to the browser, I do a refresh here. As you can see, this first span has covered 50% of this screen size. So there are things also like emphasis, which I used to create italic fields. So if I say emphasis like this, if I go here, I do a refresh here. As you can see now, we have emphasis here, and which is styled by italics. And again, this emphasis is an inline element, which means it doesn't cover the whole length of the screen. Again, we have things like strong. Strong, it just means bold. All right, bold this text. So if I go here again and do a refresh, we have this. So these are some of the HTML elements that are used behind the scene with conjunction with CSS.